Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Hello. Happy, what's today? Thursday. Duh. Faith Community. Thank you for joining us tonight on Real Talk. As you are coming in, please share the stream and tag any of your friends you think might be interested. I am here today with the wonderful and amazing Pamela Merritt. Kristian thought I was going to call him first. And the awesome, wonderful Kristian. Hey guys, how are you doing
You saved the
tonight?
best for last.
Boo. Boo. Already. He's starting already.
So, we are here tonight talking about marriage. And I am so grateful that they agreed to do this with me, even though I did encounter some bullying from Kristian yesterday. We have moved past that, I think, and we are ready to have a good conversation.
Why?
I think
Wow.
I have a quick
Why?
special guest here.
Hey.
This is my husband. Just so y'all know, I am married for real. He does exist.
Oh, hi.
He said he's the better half. So, I didn't realize that I was so obsessed with marriage, I guess, apparently, until yesterday when we were kind of doing some finalizing of things. And I don't know, I guess it's something that I'm super passionate about, probably because just like with other things I'm passionate about, like church and education, people tend to present it wrong and make us feel like, or maybe not wrong, but inappropriately, and it can do some damage. But I'm gonna ask my question so I don't get in trouble here by Kristian. We're timed, y'all. We're timed.
Why? Wait, hold on a second. Wait a minute now. We're
She
not
is
gonna put up.
wearing you out, man. She is wearing
Listen,
you out.
y'all be trying to act like I'm a tyrant. I am a loving, caring pastor who only wants the best for everyone in my ministry. Don't paint me with this in this negative light. There are people watching who don't even know me.
Well, uh, fun fact, little technical issue right here, Kristian. I'm seeing the comments on my phone, but they are not appearing in my studio.
I noticed that too. We're having some technical issues, so sorry to everybody who is making comments. We can't get them on the screen for some reason, so hopefully they come up before this is all said and done. But
But I
you
will
know,
say that Marielle did ask if you were wearing the bishop ring tonight, and I think it's
I don't,
important
I
that
don't have a bishop ring. I do not have a bishop ring.
It's a pimp ring.
No, it's not. I played football. It's a football ring. Football. Shout out. Shout. Let me see if I
Oh, I
can
thought
shout
it
out.
was the pinky. I thought she was
Nah.
talking about the pinky ring, the
Shout out
bishop Don
Alabama
Juan
A&M
ring.
University, Alabama Agricultural and Mechanical University. Shout out.
Wow.
so on that note, um, I just kind of wanted to get started off with, and Pamela, maybe you can go first because you know you're the best, and just asking, what did you like kind of grow up? You know, what's your context for marriage? What did you grow up seeing? What did you learn? Where? Who did you learn it from? What did you come to the table with in terms of marriage?
Ooh, we. Well, I come to the table with a lot because I learned. Let me start with this. I learned about marriage from home and church. Okay, I'm a bona fide church kid. But the interesting thing is that the messages were very different, and the way the messages were presented were very different. So at church, it was a lot of taught messages about marriage. At home, I did grow up in a two-parent household. My parents separated when I was 18, I think. But for the most part, I had both of my parents at the house. So a lot of those messages were caught. So some of the things I learned at home were that marriage, first of all, was an option. I didn't get even as a girl, like, you have to get married, you have to find a husband, you need a husband to take care of you. That was never my parents' message to me. My parents' message to me was, you do everything you want to do first. And then if you want to, then you can get married. That was the message at home. The other called messages at home was that marriage was hard. The other called messages was that sometimes marriage is unnecessary. At church, I was taught that marriage was the goal. I was taught that in order for me to be my complete self, I did need a husband. I was taught that the security of the marriage, as far as the marriage working out, was mostly on me. Like, all of the stuff that I needed to do to make sure that I kept my husband happy. That was the message. Those were the messages I was like directly told at church growing up. At home, it was just kind of like, I mean, if you want to, you don't have to. You need to do what you want to do first. And then if you want to get married, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, I can like relate to some of that. I think for me, there were definitely two different things that were happening. There was church and there was home. For me, I grew up, I mean, my mom was never married to my biological father, and then my mom and dad were only married for a short period of time. And my mom didn't get married again until, I mean, I was 19 or 20. She had been single for over a decade, and I could not figure out why she was getting getting married again. And then my dad actually was married 4 times, and I couldn't figure that out either. In my head, I was thinking, well, maybe it's just so he could have sex, like, legally, you know what I mean? Like, in the church context, you know? But we never had those conversations, me and my dad. So I don't know what that was. So I didn't have a lot of marriages growing up that I knew what was happening in them, or what the context of was the marriage, how a marriage was supposed to be, or anything like that. It was understood that, you know, so my mom was a single mom, and she could do what she did without a husband, but it was almost generational, because the generation above her, though, the women in my family, they were pretty much mostly all of them married, and their identity was attached to that marriage. You know, they were a wife. So I saw a lot of divorce, and then I saw a different side of a different type of marriage on a generational level. And then, of course, from church, I mean, we uphold marriage as the standard, and everybody needs to get married, and there's an order, and if you don't do things in this way, then there's something wrong with you. And I think I spent a lot of my time thinking that there was something wrong with me. But it was interesting, because I also never grew up wanting to be married. My goal was, I was going to be single, rich, living in a New York penthouse. Right up until the point that I had my first child. That's where I was going with that. So, what about you, Kristian?
So my situation is interesting, because my father was my pastor. So I grew up in a nuclear family, you know, mother, father, and I learned, the main thing I think I learned from my parents is nix the gender roles. Because when I was young, my mom always cooked. And then there was one time where mom was going out of town. Usually dad traveled because he had a preaching itinerary. But there was one time when I was real young, still in Oakland, mom was going out of town. I don't remember why she was going. And my sister and I were like, oh my God, how are we going to survive when mom's not here? Like, are we gonna be able to eat? Like, what are we supposed to do? Like, mom, are you sure you want to leave us alone with dad? It was like, I was a little bit afraid, but I'll never forget the first morning my mom was gone. I woke, actually not. First of all, my dad came in. So mom would come in the room and, she like pat me on the back, bud, rise and shine.
That's what
It's
I do.
time to get up. That's how she came at me and just kind of gently woke me up. My dad came in the room, pitch dark. He just opened the door. He said, Bubba, get up. It's time for breakfast. And he closed the door back and the lights were still off. And I was like, how could you expect me to wake up? And it's still pitch dark in here. But when I woke up, I smelled breakfast. I was like, oh my God, did my dad cook? And it was one of the best breakfasts I ever had. And I learned that day that in the house, my mom will always say this: my dad was the real cook.
I
He
just
was the
told somebody about you today.
yeah, like my mom told me, like, oh yeah, your dad taught me how to cook a lot of stuff. And then over time I realized that as my parents' schedule shifted, at times my mom would have a heavier schedule and dad would do more stuff around the house and dad would cook more. And then at times, dad's schedule was heavier and mom would pick up the slack. So I saw teamwork in my household, which was like the biggest thing. So my dad did not push a lot of bad information about marriage from the pulpit, but I was still in the church, so I still heard a lot of church people who said a lot of stuff about marriage that just wound up not being true. But I felt like I had a really good mix in my household of what a healthy marriage could look like.
Yeah, that's I, as you were describing the way that your parents were, I'm hoping that that's what my children have seen from myself and my husband, because I definitely think that's, I mean, we've definitely flipped the gender roles on their heads. I remember just a month ago, I was up on the ladder on the top of the house. I was cleaning the gutters. I'm getting all dirty, getting thing out. Meanwhile, my husband's inside, cooking up dinner. And I'm like, some of our elders would be like just turning in their graves right now at this site. So, kind of on that note, Kristian, you were saying, what are some myths about marriage that you've heard or you've learned or whatever growing up? What are some myths that you've heard about marriage?
All right, so I'm going to make a suggestion because you asked us to come up with these myths and told Pamela and I not to discuss them. And I'm curious if we have some overlap. So can we do like a round robin where I give a myth, then Pamela give a myth? And do you have some myths too?
I had the same thought. Like I tried to think of some stuff that was like far off to the left, so we wouldn't say the same stuff because we have a tendency to do that.
You see, that's why I gave the instruction. Yes, Kristian, I think that's a great idea. Who wants to go first?
You go first, babe.
Okay.
All right, Ariana, are you doing any?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna go, then Pamela, then Ariana. Let's see how these myths turn out and see if there's any overlap. So I'll start with this one. One of the myths about marriage coming out of the Christian church is that if your partner is not a Christian, then you are unequally yoked.
I have that.
Exactly. I knew that was going to happen. Ariana, this is your fault. This is your fault for not.
That is number 2 on my list. Woo!
See. So that is a myth because we tie marriage compatibility to being in the same faith tradition. But just because you're in the same faith tradition doesn't mean you have the same principles. Doesn't mean you have the same morals. Doesn't mean you have the same worldview and outlook. So a lot of people think they got to be a Christian first, and then that's the primary goal, when really there's somebody who might be agnostic, who might not be a believer, who might be a Muslim, who is more compatible for them in a romantic relationship. But we've lifted up them being in the same faith tradition, and if not, you're unequally yoked. Well, that's not even what the scripture is talking about, but that's what we do. We tend to take text and use them out of context. And of course, if you take a text out of its context, all you have left is a con. So we've been conning people into believing that if your partner is not a Christian, then you're unequally yoked and the relationship cannot work out. When in reality, many of us are married to Christians who can't communicate. Many of us are married to Christians who are still unfaithful, still are not doing the things that are necessary to be a good spouse. And I just think like we need to take a step back, because you can be a Christian and still be a shitty spouse. And I think we don't really take that into consideration. So that's my myth number one. I told you it's gonna be overlap, so we'll just see what happens.
Well, I had that crack me up because I promise you that was number 2 on my list. Number 1 isn't necessarily a myth. It's just not really explained thoroughly. So one of the myths that I have is that communication is key. You'll hear people say, communication is key, communication is key, communication is key. And it is very important to communicate. But Kristian and I do a lot of communicating, a lot. But guess what? We don't speak the same language. So there's extra work to be done outside of just communicating. Because I'll give you an example. I am a very abstract thinker. I'm very abstract when I talk. Whatever, dude. Don't do that. Don't do that publicly. Jeez. Anyway.
But for the concrete thinkers, they feel me. And then for abstract thinkers who have struggles with concrete people, they feel your pain. So I get
Kristian is very concrete. He's very like everything is really logic. Like we've worked on getting Kristian into the gray area, but when we first were together, it was really black and white, black and white, black and white. And because I'm a therapist and because I'm an empath and because like the way I think is just in abstract concepts a lot of times, that was really a struggle for us. And we did a lot. We've always done a lot of talking. So that statement that communication is key needs to also have an addendum that says, along with your communication, you need to actively listen. Along with your communication, you need to be patient. Along with your communication, you need to be careful not to judge and you need to give grace. Like for me, it's like communication is key, needs to come with fine print, like a contract. So yeah, that's one of the myths, because a lot of times people just throw that out there. Oh, communication is key. And that's a good thing to be able to do, but there's a lot more to it if you and your partner don't communicate the same way.
Which, if I can add right there, another part of that is that the main sub point for me, if I'm explaining this, is listening is a major part of communication, almost more important than the speaking aspect. So we should listen to understand and not listen to respond. So that's what I add there.
Facts on facts.
It is. It's so true. And I'm listening to you, Pam, going like, I'm glad y'all have figured it out, because
we
and my husband are
we just got no, we haven't.
Who said we figured it out?
Right. Who said that?
Ariana.
Well,
Ariana.
That you finally walked him into the gray. My bad.
Ariana,
that you've made progress.
I don't even like her half the time. I don't even like. What?
That is a big one. Like me and my husband do not come from the same place where, I mean, like it's sometimes I wonder, like, why are we married? Like we literally, the things that we think and the way we communicate those things it's just, yeah. So I'm with you on that communication needing fine print thing, because that's just, and then depending on what you're bringing in with you too, you know. So I'm working through an issue where I get in my feelings when I don't feel like I'm being listened to, you know. And I remember I was doing coaching and my coach said, where's the rule that says somebody's got to listen to you though? Like, you know. And so just the stuff that we come into with that communication thing. I think for me, one of the myths is like, and it's kind of like twofold. This whole concept of marriage being 50-50, or even like how when they say, and two will become one flesh or whatever. I have issues with the math in both of those cases, because when we say it the one way, like two will become one, I think that that's the problem, because two can become one, but what if those two aren't full, right? So if I'm coming in as a quarter and he's coming in as a quarter, we only making up half of one, and then somebody in the marriage is gonna have to, empty of themselves to be able to make up the other half, and that's not always a healthy thing. On the other end of that is this whole marriage is 50-50 thing. I've literally seen people where their life is about balancing out the skills, or balancing out the scales. They split everything down the middle. They split, the chore, and they try to keep life in balance in that way. And for me, it's much more like how Kristian said, there are going to be times in life, and that can be literally over time periods, like years or a day, where one is going to have more than the other. And so you can't keep score on, oh, I did my half, or I gave my 50, because that's just not how it works. And I think we're told a lot that, oh, marriage is a partnership and marriage is 50-50. And it's like, nah, the math doesn't really work there. And it leads to keeping score. And that's not what, or it should not be what marriage is about. So
I think we've managed to make our marriage more about creating a harmony versus a balance, because a lot of times stuff is just out of whack. If somebody's having a bad day, if somebody is overworked, if somebody is sick, if somebody there are times when I'm more needy. Like, there are times when Kristian needs stuff. So, like, to me, the 50-50 is off, because it's like a choir. Kristian uses this analogy of a choir to create harmony. There are always more altos than anybody. Always more altos than anybody. Then you have sopranos who may not be true sopranos, and there are 12 of them. 100 altos and 20 tenors. The importance is the harmony, though. We're not trying to out-sing each other. We're not trying to sing louder than the other section. We're trying to make sure that we listen and that we hear, and that we create a harmony, and that we fit together well. And that's what we try to do. Like, we just try to figure out how to make it a partnership where there's a harmony, and not like, you do this, I do that, you do this, I do that. Yeah, that doesn't work. That doesn't work for us very well.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
So it's my
Kristian.
turn.
Yep.
All right. So this is my second myth. So I want to preface this by saying I have a very interesting relationship with the word biblical. So I'm comfortable using the word biblical in reference to something that is in the Bible. I'm not comfortable using the word biblical as a way to establish a standard. Like, there is a consistent biblical standard for a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I say biblical, I mean it's in there. There's some other stuff in there too. So that, but that thing that I'm referring to is biblical. So here's my
You're
second
about
myth.
to say, I know you're about to say, I'm going to think of another one, because I know what you're about to say. Because go ahead. I'm going to think of something else, because I know what you're about to say.
It's Ariana's fault. You see, and I didn't say anything in the pre-planning meeting because I didn't want to be the bully. But hey, here we are. So one myth about marriage and from the church is that the only biblical model for marriage is one man and one woman. Is that what you had? So that it is biblical in the sense that it's in the Bible, but that it's not biblical in the sense that it is the biblical standard, because there are so many expressions of marriage in the Bible. One of the most prominent is polygamy. But in the modern day church, we've spread this myth that, oh, the biblical standard for marriage is one man and one woman, when really one man and multiple women was more prominent in the biblical account. So we've used that as a way to shame Q plus people from wanting to be
Mm-hmm.
married.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like we don't even talk about if somebody's in a open relationship, like, oh God, not a open, not a polyamorous relationship. And we shame the hell out of people for that when it's literally
It's
in the
in the
Bible
Bible.
that
Yeah.
we pledge allegiance to. So that whole notion that if it's not one man and one woman, God can't bless it. Well, that means God didn't bless Abraham's marriage. God didn't bless David's marriage. God didn't bless Solomon's marriage. God didn't bless Jacob's marriage. None of these people had blessed marriages, but these are the progenitors of the faith. But we have taken a rule in our modern day context and then retroactively applied it to the Bible when really the Bible doesn't even state that. So that's myth number 2 for me.
That's one of mine. I was gonna say it was interesting for me before I get to the one that I just came up with. It was interesting for me to always be taught as a girl about marriage being between one man and one woman and one man and one woman. And then our pastors would get in the pulpit and preach about men that have multiple wives. And I would be like, how does this work when you preach this to me and then you tell me that it's just like one-on-one? So yeah, look, thank you for explaining the point that I had, point number 2 that I had. So one of the things that I thought about while he was talking was having to take your husband's last name. Because clearly,
Ooh, that's a good one.
because
Yeah.
clearly I didn't. And I planned on it. And then after we got married, I went on the internet and I saw all of this stuff I had to do. I was like, hold the hell up. This isn't a one-stop shop where I put my name in and click it and all of my stuff changes. It's like, first of all, a lot of people don't understand the history of marriage and the history of taking your husband's last name because you were his property. It
Right.
didn't have anything to do. Yeah, it didn't have anything to do with romance. It was about property, ownership, and being seen. You were seen when you were attached to somebody. They put their last name on you, which made you valuable and seen. When he died, you spent time with your sons in order to be seen because we just weren't seen. So there's that brief history lesson. And then after I figured out that it was all of this stuff to do, I asked Kristian, I said, would you have a problem with me not changing my last name? And he said, no, I don't care about
Yes,
that.
yes, yes. I have never
Lies,
recovered. I'm
lies, the
upset you even bringing this up right now.
The lies. He uses this as a joke every time it comes up. But when I asked him, I said, do you mind if I don't take your last name? At that time, it was because of the hassle. And he said, nah, I don't care. I mean, it's not like we're not married. If you don't take my last name, it's cool. So I was like, okay, cool. Then a few months went by. And I started thinking about my family of origin, my biological family. And my daddy has 4 brothers, and all of his brothers have a son except for him. So I am my father's only child, because I'm an only child, that has the last name Merritt. So when I started thinking about it from that perspective, it became important for me to keep my last name for a very different reason. Because like I'm my father's legacy. Like I am what is left of him when he passes away. And the way our social norms are set up, boys carry their father's last names and girls don't. So I just decided to keep mine because it's important to me. And I am so glad that I'm with somebody who honors that, who honors my tie to my lineage and says, oh, that's cool because it doesn't make us any less married. That's just a social thing. We've even gotten into conversations about what our children's last names are going to be because we both have 2 different last names. So, we'll see when that comes. But yeah, the whole thing about having to take your husband's last name is
I
one of my
think
myths.
That's
I
good.
think I think that would be a good conversation to have, to talk about how so much of our idea of marriage is rooted in patriarchy,
Like
and
everything.
our idea of manhood is rooted in patriarchy, because some men are so fragile in their masculinity that they feel if their wife doesn't take their last name, it's a knock on their manhood.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a dangerous place to be in, because you may miss out on a true blessing of a relationship because the woman doesn't want to take your last name. She's willing to commit. She's willing to do all that other stuff that's required to have a successful marriage, but she doesn't want to take the last name. So now you all butt hurt, and in your little fragile masculinity, when, like, who, I shouldn't say who cares. A lot of people care. I
They
don't
do.
care. I do not care. And I don't think God cares either. But
Nope.
sorry. Go ahead,
And
Ariana.
I just want to add that, this isn't a knock against women who get married and change their last name. Like this wasn't an idea in my mind until it was just too much work to do. And then the more I thought about it, it was like, nah, that's real special to me. I'm gonna hold on to that. And if you don't mind if I hold on to that, then I'm definitely gonna hold on to it. So if married women are watching this, or women who are potentially getting married or want to get married, don't hear me talk about not changing mine and feel like it's something wrong if you want to change yours. Do what you do. Just do what works for you and your partner.
Yes, that's good. Well, I'm gonna share one more real quick, and then I think we're gonna jump to the last one. So we can keep the time. So for me, I think the one is that there is an order. That there's a way that has to be done, right? We grew up singing it. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes the baby and the baby carriage. And I think the trouble with that marriage in general is, I think I was so afraid to get married, even though that's what I never wanted to get married. But at the point where I started thinking about it, I was so afraid to do it. My husband and I we were together for like 8.5 years, kids, living together. I mean, we were in a whole life. And we would not put marriage on the table for two reasons. On both of our ends, it was because we didn't want to get married if we were going to get divorced. Because even though I had grew up, surrounded by divorce, it just wasn't something that it wasn't on the table for us. So we were afraid to get married because we were afraid of divorce and all that implies. And then the second part was, like, for me personally, I felt like because I had gone out of order, that it wasn't for me. Like, I didn't deserve it. I wasn't worthy of marriage. And I just, again, when we talk about things like having babies out of wedlock and premarital sex and all these other things, like Kristian said, I mean, babies out of wedlock is biblical, technically, So yeah, that took me a lot to get over. So
Jesus was born out of wedlock.
Before you move on, Ariana, I do want to say, I do want to acknowledge what you said. And I am really sorry that you felt unworthy of marriage at whatever point in your life, because that's just not true. And I also want to touch on this thing about order for marriage. I don't recall, and Kristian can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't recall hearing a story in the Bible about marriage that was based off of romance, dating, and falling in love. I don't recall it. So I don't think about marriage as some type of order, because if we're gonna really talk about what the Bible says, you ask for a chick, you give her daddy some goats, and she belongs to you. You see a chick that you like across the field, you want her, you find out who she belongs to, you give them stuff, and she belongs to you. Like, I can't recall any stories off the top of my head where somebody said, oh my God, he took me on the best date. He smells so good. He holds my hand. I feel so much in my heart. I think I'm in love with him. I want to marry him. I don't recall that anywhere. It was like, I trade you for your child. That's how that works. She might grow to love me. She might not. She gonna have these babies though.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about romance in the Bible, it couldn't have been in there because the root of romance is Rome. It was a Roman interjection into our view of relationships. So people were not dating and to figure out if they were compatible.
Nope.
They got married as a business relationship between two families, generally in order to, maintain or grow their wealth. So you got married to who your family arranged you to get married to, and then you had to figure it out. So a lot of times when people look at other cultures today who still have arranged marriages, we think, man, that's crazy. I would never do that.
Hmm.
But you pledge allegiance to the Bible where everybody was having arranged marriages.
Yep. 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 Yep.
So really, the people that you're judging are more biblical in their marriage than you are, because you want to date and you want to figure out if you like the person and you want to move in with the person and see if we can live together and see how we communicate, and then maybe down the line we might get married. That's not biblical at all. I don't know of a marriage, like Pamela said, in the Bible that has started off like that. So if you're really trying to be biblical in your marriage,
You
ask your
know.
parents who
Hmm.
they want you to marry, and marry exactly who they want you to marry, and then we'll talk about biblical.
Yeah, I was about to say, let your parents pick them if you want to be biblical.
Woo! No, thank you.
By the way, my
Well,
mom picked Pamela, so my marriage is biblical.
um, okay, so last question, but here's the thing. I'm gonna actually go first, and then Pam, and then Kristian, you're gonna close us out because I'm not gonna be accused of going over time. And because it makes me feel powerful, because that's like what you do on Holy Smokes, like, Kristian, you're gonna give us the final word. So I'm just, taking a little bit of some power right here. So the last question is, if you were writing your vows right now, what is something that you would include? So for me, I would say that I commit to loving myself fully and giving you space to do the same.
I didn't have specific words, but I know if we were to redo it, that I would absolutely write my own vows, and there would definitely be greatest commandment references
Right
all
there.
throughout.
That's,
Yep.
yes. Yes.
Yeah, that when I was thinking about that, that's all I could think of. Like I didn't even think of anything specific because my thought process is I would just write my vows around the framework of the greatest commandment.
And
Yep, that's what I
I
would
want to
do.
say too, what motivated kind of mine, because I was in the same line of thinking of the greatest commandment, is, and I go back to this episode all the time. Go watch Mario's, well, what with the facts podcast with Melanie and Pamela on relationships. And when you guys were talking about friendships, one thing you said in there, Pamela, was about when you think about all the damage we've done, right, along the way because we didn't love ourselves. That's because I've definitely done that before during my marriage. And that's what made me think about that, is I'm gonna learn to love me because I want to be able to love you more fully. All right, Kristian. Oh, go ahead, Pam.
I was just going to say, not only do you want to love yourself to love the other person more fully, but when you're in a relationship with somebody, you need to love yourself enough to have boundaries. You need to love yourself enough to say, some stuff I'm not going to put up with. Some stuff is not healthy for me. But if you don't have any self-love and you're not firm in that and confident in that, you will tolerate anything. So you need to have self-love for yourself to know what your boundaries are. You also need to have self-love in order to love your partner fully. I just want to add that piece because my self-love isn't just about Kristian. A lot of my self-love is about me because I came with my own stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think that's, especially in marriage, if you don't love yourself, you lose yourself.
Yeah, I say that all the time. Don't lose yourself trying to hold on to somebody else. And a lot of times people do that in a marriage. because of the notion that two become one, when you have to be comfortable with yourself before you can participate in anybody else's happiness. Because if you're not happy with yourself, you cannot even complement or supplement another person's true happiness. So for me, if I'm going to, look at this from the perspective of my vows, like the two of you, I would come at it from the perspective of greatest commandment, and I would do everything around that framework, and I would talk in my vows about how marriage is more about commitment than it is love. Because sometimes I don't have love, but even when I don't have love, like the feeling of love, when I don't really want to be around you, when I don't really like you, because that's the truth about marriage. If you're gonna be married to somebody for longer than 3 weeks, like there are gonna be times you don't like that person, you don't want to be around that person, and they get on your nerves, and you don't want to talk to them, and you might rather sleep in another room, and you might want to eat by yourself. There are gonna be times like that, but when I have those moments, my commitment outweighs the feeling of love that I had the day we said I do.
Yes.
So that's the perspective I would come from in marriage. And you have to look at it from the perspective of, does the benefit outweigh the work? Because if you're going to be in a marriage, you are going to have to work. And every now and then you got to do an assessment. Does this relationship benefit me more than it costs me? And that's a scary thing to consider, but it's the reality of marriage. So that's all that I have, all I would add. We're probably gonna do some more stuff on marriage. This was fun. I
Yeah,
think,
it was.
I
yeah,
do. I could talk forever. Can I just get? I did a good job. See,
you did a good job.
without my 10 questions. By the time Kristian got up there, it was 10 questions. He said I only gave him 5. It's fine though.
You gave me 5 2-part questions.
She gave you a 6-month series.
Exactly. Exactly. But if I can say, for those who are watching, please share this stream. Also, please partner with us in your giving. We have a giving campaign going right now to continue to improve our streaming capacity. Like, we're trying to get new cameras, a new computer, new lighting, because we want to bring a quality production to the online space, which many of you have connected with us online, and that's the primary way that you see us. So we want to bring you the best production possible. So please contribute to the work that we're doing in your giving. You can do it on the Givelify app. You can go to our website, or you can go to Cash App. All the information is at the bottom of the screen. We would really, really appreciate your support and helping us to move forward in this campaign. And also join us on Saturday for worship right back here on Facebook and YouTube. We're doing our therapy and theology worship. I'm really excited about the word that God has given me. So here's a little sneak peek. The message title for Saturday is "When God Sends a Good Therapist." When God sends a good therapist. So I'm really excited about that. Y'all jump in with us. Ariana, did I do what I was supposed to do?
Good job.
Okay, I got the thumbs up. Well, y'all enjoy the rest of your evening, and we hope to see you on Saturday for worship at TFC ATL. Peace.